Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's meeting of Boston Borough Council's Planning Committee. As you may have noticed, we've just had a few IT issues which has delayed our start. I would express my thanks to the IT chaps for their persistence in getting us live and rolling with the meeting. It is absolutely delightful, glorious to be back in person, having a meeting, and particularly in this room. It's a room that I think does fight back occasionally with the IT situation, but nonetheless, I think we are genuinely privileged to be able to hold meetings here, and I think we should enjoy it while it lasts. I am obviously Councillor Tom Ashton. I'm the chairman of this committee. To my right is Councillor Alison Austin, who is my vice chairman. I would also like to take this opportunity to welcome back Councillor Frank Pickett, who rejoined the planning committee. Good to have you back, Frank. Housekeeping, restroom facilities are on the ground floor. If the fire alarm sounds, please follow officers out of the building. The meeting is live streamed, so would all persons addressing the meeting do so clearly and into the microphone. It is important. I know sometimes it's difficult when we're trying to address different points to different members of the committee around the room, but if you could please speak into the microphone, everyone then has the best opportunity to hear what you're saying. Members of the public are free to leave at any time. We do have a couple of speakers on the substantive item we've got on the agenda today. So we'll move into part one of the agenda, which is to receive apologies for absence and notification for any substitution. Karen, please.
Thank you, Chairman. We have one apology from Councillor Yvonne Stevens, no substitute member. Thank you.
Thank you. Item 2 is to sign the minutes of the last meeting, which was the 17th of July. I'm assuming everyone has had opportunity to read them. Do I have your approval to sign those when I get a moment during the meeting, please? Thank you. And before we move to individual declarations of interest in respect of any items on the agenda, could I ask Karen to give the standing declarations, please?
Thank you, Chairman. I would confirm that standing declarations of interest are tabled for all members of this committee within the minutes for this meeting, for those who are members of Lincolnshire County Council, members of the South East Lincolnshire Joint Strategic Planning Committee, and also those who are representatives of the Internal Drainage Board. Thank you.
Sorry, do we have any written question from members of the public?
No questions, Chairman. Were there individual declarations at all, Chairman?
Thank you. Does anyone have any declarations in respect of items on today's agenda? Thank you. That concludes the preliminary items, and we'll move on to part 2 and receive the report as tabled. Our first item is application B2139 on page 9 of the agenda, and Mr. Carrington will present this report. We do have public speakers on this application. The first is Mr. Macbeth, and we also have Mr. Kempter, but I'll hand over to Mr. Carrington to present the report, please.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Good morning, members. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. As you can see, this is a major application for the approval of reserved matters for 75 dwellings. This is phase 3 of the Heron Park development. First approved under a hybrid application. That's an important point which we'll return to. B170317. That was approved in February 2018 for up to 200 dwellings. This is the third tranche of those dwellings. To give you an idea of where the site is, as you can see, that is the site. On the left, there is Wibberton Road, just off the bottom of the picture, Slippery Gout Lane, and Heron Way on the right, slightly out of date. If you see the dark wavy line there, that's a drainage ditch that actually marks the southern boundary of the site. To the south of that, that area has now been built out with the earlier phases of Heron Park. You can also see just underneath the red oval on the right-hand side, a row of 6 bungalows and 2 houses, which are at the north end of Heron Way, which is a cul-de-sac, so that's not a through road. Just to look at that accurately in terms of the site boundary, you can see the red edge there. To the south of that, the existing development. In the bottom right-hand corner, where there is a white space, that is Baptist Farm. That is actually an integral part of the development, but it was granted under a separate planning application. To the north on the blue edge, that is land in the applicant's ownership, and part of that on the right-hand side of the picture there is phase 4, for which an application has been submitted but not yet determined. So that, moving on, is the presentation layout, which you'll have seen in your documents and on the website for this phase of the development, 75 units of market housing. So we'll do a quick photographic tour to give you an idea. That photograph is looking north up Wibberton Low Road from the junction with Slippery Gout Lane. And you can see on the right, phase 1, which gives you a good idea of the style of the housing. And if we move to the next one, from the same point, looking east along Slippery Gout Lane, again, you can see construction, finished houses in the immediate foreground, and in the background, development going on phase 2 and on the Baptist Farm houses. Moving now to the other end of Slippery Gout Lane at the junction with Heron Way, looking back to the west, you can see that existing works going on your right-hand side. And if we look now north up Heron Way, you can see on the immediate left, development underway on Baptist Farm. And just beyond that, you can see 2 houses which are occupied from phase 2 of the development, and beyond those again, some wrapping around from phase 1. Moving further up moving further up Heron Way now. On the left-hand side is the application site. To the north, you can see that row of bungalows to which we will return. On the right is a board-maintained drain, and on the left, a riparian drain. And that is really looking back at the same view. So you can see phase 1 on the right-hand side and the application site. When I take a walk through the application site, again, we're standing here at the entrance to the field as it currently is. It's just an unused arable field on Heron Way with the new development on the left. Note the electricity pylon. That is 132 kilovolt, I beg your pardon, line, which really defines the site in many ways. Obviously, it's sterile underneath it. There is no building on the west side of it. The area you're looking at there, just below that fawn-coloured close-bordered fence, a little to this side, that will be where the attenuation basin will be and the proposed leap. So from pretty well the same point, looking back toward the housing on Heron Way, you can see the bungalows there, and at the very end, 2 substantial houses. And moving to the next shot, this just zooms in to give you a little bit more detail. The bungalows themselves are quite well set back from the boundary fence through a range of outbuildings. That rather prominent pointed red gable end is an outbuilding. You can see other outbuildings there. For the most part, the boundary treatments are either a 2 meter, 1.8 meter close bordered fence or an evergreen hedge or a mixture of the two. I thought it would be helpful just to show you the existing development, because the proposed dwellings, and we're looking at the plans in a second, are really very similar. So this is on looking into the site from the entrance at Wibberton Low Road. And then if we move on to the next one, we can see more clearly some of the house types and the materials. And again, very similar are proposed in the current application. So that's a block of 3. That's looking back down the road, and you can see that the swales within the development give it quite a spacious feel. And we also have some green spaces in the proposal before us, and that's an example of one in phase 1. And that's just the topographical map. Fundamentally, the site is fairly flat, but you saw where the attenuation pond is, and that's roughly where it drains to. So a look at some house types. This is a large development with many very similar house types. We're going to give you a quick run through a selection of those. I won't pause on each. Thanks, Mike. So here we have different types of semi-detached. All the development is 2-story. And moving on, we have quite a wide range of those, as you can see. And then we have similar house styles, but in short blocks of 3, little mini terraces of 3, and various types of those. And the final one, as I say, members would have been able to see those on the website if they want to see more of the house types. We do have those available. And the final thing, and we'll return to this later, is the issue of drainage ownership, which is one of the issues raised in the call-in by Councillor Mrs. Austin, and we'll come back to that. So if I can now just take you through the main material planning considerations. In terms of policy, the policy is exactly as laid out in your report, and I won't go through that again now. In terms of representations, and we do have an objector here with us this morning, we had 8 neighbour objections, and the grounds included the fact that Heron Way was considered to be unsuitable for extra traffic. There was a feeling that the new properties should be bungalows, like the majority of the houses on Heron Way. Concerns about adverse impacts on privacy. There was a particular point made about the poor road surface on Heron Way, a feeling that additional parking should be to the rear, and concerns about privacy and the point that it could, in some correspondents' view, be maintained by planting evergreens to the rear of those properties. As far as official consultees were concerned, we had no objections from official consultees, and that includes the Witherton Parish Council. The County Council, in its capacity as lead local flood authority, and the Black Sluice Drainage Board requested clarification of future ownership of the drainage assets, and I'll come back to that later in this presentation. And County Council Highways expressed a preference for an alternative scheme of entry for those eastern dwellings which are shown fronting onto Heron Way. We'll return to that shortly. This particular scheme, members, has no affordable housing component. The Boston Borough Council Housing Manager has confirmed that that is satisfactory because phase 4 will pick up the required number of affordable houses mandated under the original outline planning permission. Moving now to the appearance of the scheme and the impact on local character. Well, as you've seen from the plans and the quick go round of the existing development, the design and appearance very much accord with the earlier built phase of Heron Park. All the buildings will be 2-story. There'll be 71 houses arranged as semi-detached or in short terraces of 3, plus 4 maisonettes in one single block. The materials are as specified in the submission: 3 types of red or cream bricks and 3 types of grey or roof tiles. And again, you've seen examples of that in the built form, and those are considered by your officers to be satisfactory. The layout, well, I showed you in the photographs the 132 kilovolt power line. That strongly influences the layout, with the western part of the site entirely given open to public open space, the attenuation basin, and the future leap. The built design does include central green spaces, which you've seen from the plan, and the swales, essential, of course, for drainage, will add to that open feel of development. The proposal now presents an active frontage to Heron Way. Now, we'll discuss the highways issues in a moment, but in design terms, that layout responds well to the existing development. Heron Park residents, we may hear this from a speaker in a few moments, have requested that the new dwellings should be bungalows to fit in with the character of their row. However, your officers consider that the wider area shows a mix of dwellings types, and using 2-story dwellings in this development reflects earlier phases of Heron Park, and it helps unify the scheme with a clear and consistent identity. It certainly is not, in officers' view, unacceptably dissonant with existing housing nearby. And we do note that whilst Heron Way does have 6 bungalows, it also has 2 substantial houses at the north end. So overall, your officers feel that the design, the layout, the materials are considered satisfactory, and that the proposal will be in keeping with the character of the locality and, of course, with the provisions of the local plan. Members, I'll move now to the issue of neighbour amenity. Existing western neighbours on Wibberton Low Road will not be substantially affected, since the new dwellings are all to the east of the power line. There will only be the attenuation basin, the leap, and some POS behind those dwellings. And the relationship with the earlier phases, which you saw bordering the site already built out, are also satisfactory. Now, all of those existing neighbours will be used to what is in effect a rural view, an open field. That is going to be urbanised, and clearly there's a change of character there. But loss of view is not a material planning consideration. The key issue is whether this development will cause unacceptable harm through overlooking, loss of privacy, and so forth. Now, the impact on Heron Way is one which your officers have considered very carefully indeed. And the southernmost 3 bungalows are the ones which would be potentially most affected. The new dwellings proposed under this application would be directly to their west. But when you look at the actual distances dwelling to dwelling, the bungalows do tend to have relatively deep gardens, and a rear boundary treatment, as we've seen in the photograph, of a 1.8 metre fence or evergreen hedging, or both. The dwelling to dwelling separation distances are between 25 metres and 30 metres, about 25.5 metres down to the maisonette block to the southwest. Those directly rear range between 25 metres and 30 metres. Now, if you look at the slide on the screen, that is one which has been prepared by the applicant to demonstrate the relationship between the new dwelling, which you see on your left, and the southernmost of the bungalows in the row on Heron Way. You can see that takes into account the fact that, for obvious reasons of flood risk, when we build today in locations like this, we raise finished floor levels. So you can see that the new dwelling on the left-hand side is on a little plinth, as is its rear patio. It then falls down to the back garden. At the time the bungalows were built, that practice didn't happen. So effectively, you can just see 2 white figures where Mike is showing the pointer there. Those are people height. And you can see the approved fencing, or the proposed fencing, which is 1.8 metre close bordered side and rear. So from anyone within the house on the ground floor, or standing in the patio on the back garden, which is raised in a similar way to the finished floor levels of the dwelling, their sight line would actually come out just below eaves height on the bungalow to its rear, on that southernmost bungalow. And pretty much the same applies as you go up, although as you've seen, there are existing outbuildings which would further get in the way. So from those key habitable rooms on the ground floor of the new dwelling, they would not be, or from its garden, they would not be direct overlooking. Clearly, when people are in bedrooms, they could look out, but people don't tend to spend most of their times in bedrooms looking out of the window. They tend to be in bed. Now, even accounting for those raised finished floor levels on the new housing, your officers feel that overlooking from those key habitable areas is not unacceptably harmful in terms of neighbour amenity. The relationship between existing and new dwellings is sensitive, but in this case, we feel that the separation distances are quite sufficient, and indeed they are greater than those found in many urban situations elsewhere, and indeed in earlier phases of Heron Park. So those resultant relationships, just to confirm, we consider to be comparable with other residential forms where back-to-back relationships occur, and hence is not considered to be uncommon. And indeed, there are other examples locally beyond this, such as on Sir Isaac Newton Drive. If we go back to the layout, please, Mike. Thank you very much. I'll now turn, Chairman, to access, parking, and highway safety. Now, of the 75 dwellings proposed, 66 would access via the earlier phase of Heron Park, leading on to Wibberton Low Road. Within the development, there is good permeability with footways and also a shared footway cycleway, which facilitates active transport. Parking provision meets the requirements of the local plan. Now, it has been raised by local residents and indeed by Councillor Mrs. Austin in her call-in, the issue of the original layout of the outline. And it is correct to say that the outline layout showed no access to Heron Way. And remember, 9 dwellings access Heron Way. And none was anticipated in the officer report of that 2017 application. However, it is important to remember that that application, B170317, was a hybrid. Only the details of phase 1 were actually secured. All the other 129 dwellings then envisaged were outlined with, and I quote the decision, all matters reserved. And those reserved matters include access. The layout, the indicative layout, was not secured by condition for the outlined dwellings. So there is absolutely nothing to stop the applicants submitting variations on that original concept plan. So the applicant did that with phase 2, where 4 dwellings accessed Heron Way and no objection was raised. So this application, which again seeks to access Heron Way for 9 dwellings, as we've said, it's perfectly proper to make that, and we have to assess that against the individual merits of the submission, not against the indicative layout of the outline permission. Now, the County Council has expressed concerns about those 9 dwellings fronting Heron Way, and those were discussed at an early stage by officers. It's just worth remembering that regarding the overall development, the transport assessment shows that when all 200 dwellings are built, it anticipates an additional 1.5 vehicles at peak hours. That is not a significant addition to the network. And regarding Heron Way, the County Council did not object to Heron Way access on phase 2, or indeed on the Baptist Farm application, which again has access both to Slippery Gut and to Heron Way. There was no mention in either of those applications made of the road size or the condition, although officers have to stress to the committee that the condition of the highway is not a planning matter. It's a one for county highways to maintain. The incremental traffic from the proposed dwellings fronting Heron Way will not represent, in our view, a danger to road users. It's a modest increase in overall numbers, and whilst the road is indeed modest in size, it is typical of many lanes in the area which carry far more traffic. And as a cul-de-sac, there will be no through traffic, and therefore it's likely that traffic will be limited to that serving the existing and proposed dwellings, plus the odd delivery. Heron Way is speed limited, but its dimensions and form also make speeding unlikely, and as such, we consider it to be appropriate for shared space use, where the non-segregated nature of the highway itself assists traffic calming and road safety. And in such situations, it is not uncommon for pedestrians to mix with vehicular traffic without issue. Now, members will note from the supplementary report that the County Council's final comments do not object to the proposal. They continue to express a preference for an alternative scheme, but it is also of note that the County Council does not have grounds for objection. There are basically, as the supplementary details, 2 possible reasons to object on highways grounds. One is severe adverse impact on network capacity, and the second is danger to road safety, and neither apply in this case, and it is for that reason that the County Council has not formally objected. It therefore follows that in your officer's view, there are no sustainable planning reasons to refuse this application on highways grounds. Now, as you will be aware from the late editions which we've had, seeking to address these matters, the applicant has tabled an amended plan which shows splayed entrances on in the highway and a passing place, and also suggested possible regrading works on the carriageway. As the supplementary report indicates, officers regard these as positive and helpful suggestions, which could ease the ability of vehicles to pass each other when required. So officers are therefore asking that if the application is approved, they are granted delegation to finalise those details in conjunction with County Council Highways colleagues and the applicant. And the supplementary report shows a likely condition which would deal with those matters and secure them. Moving toward the final matters now, Chairman, a word on flood risk and drainage. The application, as members will have read, is supported by a very comprehensive suite of documents and plans, to ensure the proper drainage of surface and foul water. This is, of course, a location in flood risk zone 3. Now, the key parameters of the drainage plan for the entire site were established at the hybrid application stage. The present proposal accords completely with those details, and the drainage proposals are considered appropriate both by your officers and by our expert advisors. However, both the County Council as lead local flood authority and the Black Sluice have requested clarification of future management of the various drainage assets. And that was a point, again, reiterated by Councillor Mrs. Austin in her call-in. The supplementary refers to an additional plan, which I showed you briefly a few moments ago, which shows the current ownership of all of those assets, and a proposed condition, which you will see in the main report, will secure every drainage assets either to Anglian Water or to the site management company. Broadly speaking, anything below ground will go to Anglia via a Section 104 agreement, anything above ground to the management company. And again, the condition will allow your officers to finalise the exact details, but members can rest assured that everything will have a future management option absolutely firmed up before any of the dwellings are occupied. And just a final comment, Chairman, on ecology. Again, we consider a particularly important subject. The ecology report from 2017 is considered to remain applicable, and its recommendations, including those for protected species and particularly the endangered water vole, are recommended to be approved, secured rather, by condition, as are details of the landscape planting, which may contribute strongly to biodiversity. So, Chairman, to conclude and summarise, the proposal will add 75 units of market housing to Heron Park, in keeping with the existing character of the development, and it will accord with the wider local character. We do not feel that it will cause unacceptably harmful amenity impacts to existing neighbours. The proposal provides a permeable internal layout with provisions for active movement and access to public transport, and both the primary access to Wibberton Low Road and the access of some dwellings to Heron Way are acceptable in terms of highway safety, though it is noted that further refinements may be made to Heron Way. The proposal includes effective measures for drainage and against flood risk, and whilst this phase does not include affordable housing, that will not impede the overall Heron Park scheme meeting its obligations for affordables. The proposal is in accord with the general scale and layout of the outline scheme, is in keeping with the local plan and relevant guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework. So, the development will make a valuable contribution to the housing stock of the borough, and the recommendation is to approve subject to conditions. And as it says at the end of the supplementary report, officers request that in the event of the recommendation being carried, members grant officers delegation to finalise the necessary conditions, including any consequential amendments arising compared to those as published. Thank you very much, Chairman. That concludes the formal presentation. I'll be happy to take questions when members debate the case.
Thank you very much, Mr. Carrington. We have, as I said earlier, speakers on this application. The first speaker is Mr. Macbeth. Would you care to come to the table, please? You'll have 5 minutes to make your representation. A single bell will sound when you have 30 seconds remaining, and then 2 bells will sound signalling your 5 minutes is up. So in your own time, Mr. Macbeth, please.
Good morning, and thanks for this opportunity to speak today. I'm here to represent the interests of the existing Heron Way residents. I've had a number of discussions with my neighbours over a number of months concerning objections, which you're all aware of by now. They are as follows. When outline permission was granted, it said that Heron Way would not be affected as all access would be from Wibberton Low Road. This changed with item 7.7, as indicated above, plots 91, 94 will gain access on the Heron Way through this aspect of the development will not harm residential amenity in terms of traffic generation, noise, disturbance, etc. That's not the case. This modification, when compared with the illustrative master plan at outline stage, is considered a logical improvement to the scheme. Who for? Such a change should have been notified to all Heron Way residents by post, as we were all directly affected by this change. None of us were until it was too late. Our quality of life is being affected. Local authorities are obliged to protect the living standards of local residents. Mud continues to cover our cars with the mess emanating from the site, and the road has deteriorated significantly since work began. What remedial action will be taken and when? Our entrance pillars outside our house have been damaged a number of times since work began as delivery vehicles do their three-point turns opposite our driveway, which is at the end of Heron Way. With elevated two-storey properties planned, all existing residents will have their privacy threatened. All adjacent new properties, including those immediately behind, should be single-storey. This would mean that they would be in character with the existing and less intrusive. I was told by a neighbour that such a plan had been submitted, but this turned out to be a red herring. The proposed development is currently only in character with itself. It will alter the pattern of development and not be in keeping with the detached bungalows on Heron Way. We had hoped for some space between us and the development, and that it bordered with evergreens to help with privacy. Not an unreasonable request considering the loss of what we have currently. To control future parking issues that will undoubtedly cause issues with neighbours, it's essential that double yellow lines be placed along Heron Way, and this must be enforced. I'm aware that LCC Highways has pointed this out. There's a narrow lane and recommendations of its own. Numerous issues have already arisen, and one neighbour has already reported this to the planning department. He was told that a site visit occurred and that everything was as it should be. He was then told to contact the police if any further incidents occurred. There are 2 doctors that live on Heron Way, and it's essential that the road is never blocked by inconsiderate parking as they are regularly on call. I'm not sure how the police would feel about dealing with issues caused by this obvious oversight. It could become an epicenter for antisocial behaviour statistics. Further parking should be made available to the rear, as there will be social gatherings that will bring many more vehicles at times. This can be corrected today, but only if you do the right thing. I urge you to do a site visit to further appreciate what I've just said here today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Macbeth. Our second speaker is Mr. Kempster, who is joining us online. Again, Mr. Kempster, you have 5 minutes to address the committee, and I'll let you start in your own time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today in support of the Reserve Matters application for a further 75 dwellings on our site at Heron Park, Boston. Your planning officers have produced a comprehensive report, which, in our opinion, properly analyses the relevant planning policy matters and recommends approval of the application. There are no statutory objections to the application, with neighbour representations understood to be the reason for committee consideration. The principle of residential development on this land has already been established by the Outline Permission, so we have worked with your officers and other statutory consultees to address any concerns arising from the detailed design. We recognise that the major issues relate to the existing properties on Heron Way with regards to access and amenity. As part of the design for this site, properties fronting Heron Way were concluded to provide the most appropriate site layout and street scene with the minimal amount of traffic generation felt to be acceptable in planning terms. There are 8 existing dwellings on Heron Way, with a further 6, as we've heard, already been approved by recent permissions and are currently under construction. Even with the additional 9 dwellings now proposed, our transport consultants have calculated there will be in the region of 10 vehicle movements per hour, i.e. 1 vehicle movement every 6 minutes, at peak times once the development is completed. This we believe, or this is well within the capacity for this road of this nature and could not be considered unsafe in highway terms. To further improve the position, you will note from the supplemental report that we've proposed the inclusion of passing opportunities as part of the development, which would be an enhancement for existing local residents. In addition, and whilst not a planning matter, we will also be regrading the surface of the existing carriageway on Heron Way as part of the proposed drainage solution for the development. With regards to amenity, we have sought to minimise impact by the careful orientation of dwellings and inclusion of appropriate separation distances with a minimum of 28 metres from new dwellings to the rear of the existing properties on Heron Way. Landscaping will be used to further reduce the impact and ensure there is no unacceptably harmful impacts on residential amenity. If the committee are minded to follow officers' recommendations to approve this application, then construction is planned to commence in a matter of weeks. Phases 1 and 2, which has been pointed out by the planning officers, are now nearing completion, which will provide 103 affordable dwellings in partnership with a local register provider. If approved, this application, phase 3, will include 21 homes, which will be provided under the government's pilot project for first homes, where homes will be available at 70% of market value. All dwellings have to be completed by March 2023 as a condition of the funding for this scheme, hence the need for construction to commence as soon as possible. In addition, on this phase, Chestnut Homes will be constructing and selling some of the units as market housing, and we are also in discussion with register providers with a view to potentially some further affordable as part of this phase of the development. Granting approval will enable a continuation of housing delivery on this site, which has already produced over 100 dwellings since we commenced in the summer of 2019. We therefore recommend approval for this application. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kempster. Does any member of the committee wish to question either of the public speakers, please? Councillor Noble first, then Councillor Evans.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, in relation to drainage, Mr. Councillor probably elaborate on this. On page 31, we have a tautology. It says the ownership of the dike separating the present application site from the earliest phase is riparian. Riparian being either an adjective inhabiting a riverbank, or in this case a dike, or it's the ownership of the land. So my question to this is regarding drainage. Mr. Carrington said that the above site drainage is going to be a site management company. Now, is that site management company, is that a subsidiary of Chestnut Homes? Can you elaborate, please, or explain?
I think these are questions for the public speakers, not the general.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I'm sorry.
Thank you. Thank you. Councillor Evans, please.
Right, so bear with me. I've got a couple of questions, really. First of all, I think it's disappointing that we've not contacted, or the residents of Heron Way were not contacted. I think that is a disappointment. So maybe an apology should go to them. It does seem to me like it doesn't appear to be in character with what.
Councillor Evans, are these questions for either of the public speakers?
Right. Yeah. So okay. Would something you would consider? I mean, it may be too late now. Is the fact that you seem to be putting all the affordable homes in one area, almost containing them. Wouldn't it have been better to have?
Councillor Evans, I'm afraid we can only ask questions on this application, not on effectively what might be another application.
Okay, let me see if I've got something they can answer. Can I ask them if they would consider a cycle path? Am I allowed to ask that? Can I ask if the shortage of bungalows was considered? Can I ask if bedroom windows overlooking isn't?
I don't think
none of them
questions are really relevant to this application. We have to deal with the application that's before us,
okay,
not the
that's
application
fine.
that we would like to see.
That's fine. Okay.
Thank you. In that case, I see no one else indicating that they would like to ask either of our members of the public any questions. So I would thank them both for their contributions, and I will now open the meeting up to committee members to deliberate. In the meantime, I will just ask Mr. Carrington and Mr. Gildersleeve if there's any points that you would like to comment with.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to pick up on the point around the notification. I can give assurance to members that in terms of the notifications undertaken on this application, they were in accordance with both national legislation and the council's own internal processes. This is a major application. It will have been in the local press. It will have also had a site notice, which is the minimum that we are obligated to do. So therefore, whilst I note the objectors would preferred a notification by post. That is not our minimum legal requirement to do so, and therefore the application can be lawfully determined. In terms of the, I'll just pick up on Councillor Evans's point around the affordables. Clearly, we have to determine the application that is before us. The affordable housing requirement was set by the outline. There was no requirement for splitting that delivery across all 3 phases evenly, for example. There is the ability, the first phases have been front loaded in effect. So now we're in a situation where the remainder of the affordables can be accommodated in phase 4. So in terms of compliance with the outline, this scheme is fully compliant. However, as you will have heard from Mr. Kempster, there is potential for additional affordable homes, both through the First Homes pilot scheme, which is certainly something that the government is looking to roll out and is a big positive for the area. So potentially there are a further 21 affordable homes over and above the outline through that. But also he did allude to the fact that there are ongoing discussions with a registered provider, a Longhurst, Lincolnshire Housing Partnership, a platform housing group, again, to potentially provide more affordable housing. So in terms of the affordable housing, this is meeting the minimum requirement, it's legally compliant, and there is potential for an increased volume. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm happy to open it up for debate. And my first speaker is Councillor Austin, please, and then Councillor Nathan.
Thank you, Chairman. Right, first of all, excuse me, thank you for the presentation. I called this in as a ward member with an open mind. I was asked by Mr. Carrington some time ago, long before the report was published, and my reasons for calling it in are stated on the page, on page 24 of your papers. Because of the concerns raised and the objections by, first of all, Heron Way residents, but also by the county council itself having concerns, which from experience very rarely happens. And then, of course, there was also, well, everything really is 3 points, isn't it? It's Heron Way, it's the drainage, and it's the access. So those were the reasons that were the concerns that I then felt this should be aired in committee so that those residents could see that the planning process was carried out properly. Right, as I say, I had an open mind and I still have an open mind. Right, we've heard now, and we've seen also in the recent document that we got yesterday, the revised plans have gone a long way, I think, to alleviating some of the concerns regarding overlooking of the bungalows. Now, we've known all along that this, of course, the principle of development on the site was established back with that parent application, if you like, 17/0317. So that is a foregone conclusion. We're looking now at the details. So the overlooking matter, I think, in my mind, is quite fairly and lawfully dealt with. The actual Heron Way is the next matter. I think Highway's submission that we received yesterday has dealt with as much as can be fairly done, and the revised plan to the housing has again, if you like, reduced the number of possible outlets by having 2 houses, 2 properties sharing 1 entrance. So I feel that this is not unreasonable, and has been stated, there are no legal reasons for objecting to this on those grounds. Heron Way is basically very much a rural lane that has served ever since well, within my lifetime within my time, certainly as a councillor, has just served those bungalows and nothing else. Right, my other points then. The house types, yes, they're consistent with Chestnut Homes' development. I agree that they're not anything, shall we say, startling, and they're certainly not sympathetic to the bungalows, but they are what is in keeping with the rest of the development. Right. Interestingly, this site was not in the local plan. It still is not in the local plan, but it was just submitted slightly before the local plan was approved. I do have issue with one statement. It is not a sustainable site with regards to public transport. If you consider walking a mile to the nearest bus stop being sustainable, but the principle is established, so you know that's that. It is, however, very well located as regards access to the industrial estate, and I'm pleased to see that there's access for cycling and walking from the rest of the estate through onto Heron Way and then directly through to the industrial estate. And I hope that that sustainable use, or we can hope that that sustainable use of transport becomes the norm for those residents, rather than having to get in their car and drive round unsuitable roads to get to work. As a matter of interest, this land is entirely within the parish of Boston. It's not in Wibberton. This is a misconception. Wibberton Low Road is not in Wibberton. It just leads to Wibberton. The boundary actually is the dike that cuts across. So from the point of view of wards and parishes, this development and the subsequent phase will all be within the parish of Boston, the BTAC area, but the existing properties are within the parish of Wibberton. So it's going to cause fun, I know, with a polling district, but so be it. Right. I think I've addressed all those concerns, and I think that I like to think I've been fair to what I call my residents on Heron Way, but we really have no planning grounds now for refusing this. So I am prepared to move. It's early in the evening meeting, I know, but I'm prepared to move that this application is approved, subject to the appropriate conditions, which are basically going to be determined by delegated to the officers, but as set out in the paper. But I would just like to make one stress that the construction management plan takes consideration of Heron Way, because that has got to be the access to those bungalows throughout the entire construction period. Right, that's it then. I'm prepared to move that then if anyone subsequently would second it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Austin. Councillor Noble, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I'll recur to the point I was making earlier with Ms. Counten. First of all, I thought, Ms. Counten, you gave us an excellent presentation. It's very clear, very thorough, very detailed. Yes, going back to page 31, we've got this tautology on the top of page 31, the ownership of the dike, separating the present application site from the earlier phases, riparian. Well, the riparian refers to ownership. So my question is this, the management company that's referred to, the site, is that Chestnut Homes itself? Does Chestnut Homes own the dike, or is this site a management company a subsidiary of Chestnut Homes? So you can tell us that later, Mr. County. Okay, thank you. Going back to a point made by Mr. Macbeth, which is to do with Heron Way. Now, I read on page 29 that it's noted that vehicular access for 4 dwellings was already allowed under phase 2 of the permission. So I think that matter's already been dealt with. First of all, I think the design is sympathetic. It's congruous with the surrounding area. I know there's housing on the south, west and eastern sides. I think that the house design, it might not be particularly engaging, but it's appropriate, I think. They're mainly 2-story dwellings. The building materials are sympathetic to what's already there in terms of the colours of the bricks and the colour of the roof tiles. I think it's very good that they've not tried to put housing under the power line, and that's where the swales are going to be. The access to the site is perfectly adequate, and there's also an existing mix of dwelling types, not only in the development itself, but in the surrounding area. The separation distances are fine. I noticed that most of them are sort of 25 to 28 metre separation distances. I think the minimum requirement is 22 metres. Finished floor levels weren't mentioned. Slab levels were. It was interesting to know, perhaps it's in the conditions I didn't read, but interesting to know what the finished floor levels are. Obviously, are going to be slightly higher than the existing dwellings, the old dwellings, not on the new site, I mean. Access is perfectly adequate, I think, and so is parking provision. I was convinced that the road traffic density on Heron Way is not going to be significant. The last point I'd like to make is about affordable housing, because obviously this particular phase is all market housing, but I think it's really important when it comes to the last phase that the affordable housing agreement is carefully monitored, because we do want to make sure that that final phase of 22 dwellings meets the affordable housing requirement. That really needs to be enforced, because we've seen what's happened in the past sometimes. Development companies have tried to get round that. So, and we all know that there's a dire need for affordable housing bodies. So I think that's to be really reinforced. But otherwise, I'm perfectly content with the proposal. I think it's good, and I will second Councillor Austin's recommendation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Noble. Mr. Carrington, please.
Thanks very much, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor, for those kind remarks. It's my first presentation to this committee, and a pleasure to be here. Just to pick up on 3 points you made in reverse order. Firstly, as far as the affordables, I'm pleased to confirm that phase 4, the application for phase 4 is in. It has not yet been determined, but the housing manager has confirmed that phase 4 alone will meet the requirements set out in the outline, which was 60% overall of those 200 had to be affordable. So that's a box which we can tick. In terms of finished floor levels, you're right to highlight those. Those are actually conditioned in the outline for all subsequent stages, and these comply with the finished floor levels which were set, which were those approved by the flood authorities and, of course, by the Environment Agency. As far as drainage, you've homed in on an extremely important point. The use of the word riparian was intentional, but actually it refers to the fact that after phase 1 was completed, that part of the overall site was sold to the housing group that have it. So technically, to the south of that red line, to the south of the dike, the little non-board maintained dike, that is actually owned by another party, not by the current applicant. So you've got one person on one side, one person on the other, with riparian responsibilities. Now, it was for that reason that I discussed with the applicant the importance of clarifying these assets. And just before I had to submit the report that you've quoted from, just after I had to submit that, we got the drainage ownership plan, which does clarify who owns what. So that is the master plan, if you will, in terms of drainage ownership, and that will help us make sure that every drainage asset above ground or below ground either goes to Anglian Water, primarily those below ground. The management company is a management company which will be set up to govern all the above ground public assets, be it swales, be it the tops of drains, be it the public open space within this development. So that won't be a subsidiary of as best I understand it, of the developer. That will be a separate company, and basically everybody in one of those 75 houses will make a modest contribution towards that cost. You're welcome.
Thank you very much. I've got Councillor Bedford and Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Well, I went down there on Friday morning to look at the site, as I do with every application that comes to this committee, because my main concern obviously was the drainage of the site. The dike that actually runs through at the side of phase 2 is already piped, and it's there quite clearly and visible, the size of the pipe that's going to be joined up. The dike, I assume, in front of the additional dwellings on Heron Way will be piped and filled and taken across to the Blacksluis-Witherton Town Drain. So all the fluvial conditions will be absolutely first class, because that is one of the Blacksluis's main priority drain, that Witherton Town Drain, to get rid of it down to the Witherton pump. So I've no problems at all with all that side of it, and with the condition now, or the offer of resurfacing the little bit of Heron Way, which isn't very good, will be put correct. So I'm quite happy to support it. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Bedford. Councillor Skinner, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank both people presenting that they've, both done it with passion. Regarding planning concerns, all these planning concerns are covered. As you know, Chairman, I am really keen to establish that when people take riparian rights on, they know exactly what they're getting, and that will include all the house owners. There might be actually a company set up initially, but as long as people know what they're taking on long term and how it may affect them, then I have no problems. But riparian rights are just one of those things that we live with in Lincolnshire, and for a long time I believe that the legal profession has not disclosed things as they should, and there's no reason. This is a high end application, and I will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evans, please.
Unfortunately, well, thank you for the presentation. It was very clear, and I know all the I's are dotted. I know you do a fantastic job, but I'm a bit uncomfortable with this, and I'm uncomfortable with it. And just on 2 points, and on the listening to what the residents are saying, because we could all be one of those residents. And the fact is, if a bedroom window is facing your garden, it is very uncomfortable. The fact that you think that perhaps people go to bed and don't look out of the windows, you do get people looking out of the windows, so you do feel uncomfortable if you're overlooked. So that's 1 point. I've only got 2 other points. One is we've got a really big shortage of bungalows, which sell very, very well. I can't understand why we would not put bungalows behind, or we should keep in, it should look like it's in keeping with the original site, not look like it's in keeping with the new site that's come in, and just totally forget about the people that were already there. I feel either the other entrance is a different entrance is a way forward if you're not going to put bungalows behind. So at the moment, I feel uncomfortable, and I won't be supporting this. I think the rest of it is fantastic. The drainage has been sorted. I just think that we've got to consider the people that are living there, and that for the sake of putting bungalows behind. And I also think that the cars will become a big issue, because we see that constantly. Everywhere we've built, we see that car parking becomes a big issue. And I do think public transport, all the children going to school, there's going to be, and being picked up, there's going to be key times that there's going to be a lot of cars going in and out. And the average house now has at least 2 cars. So, and I always think that the car count is usually underestimated. But yeah, so at the moment, unless I hear something to change my mind, even though this is the only issue for me, everything else is fine. I won't be supporting it at this time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Evans, I don't have any other speakers on my list. Councillor Goodale, please. I do now.
Well, thank you, Chairman. I think we can all sympathise with the bungalow or the residents of Heron Way. Obviously, they've been or had that environment for a considerable amount of time. I mean, we did when we actually made provision for the industrial estate going right along Marsh Lane. We actually created Heron Way. Before then, it was Marsh Lane. So it was an actual through road for any type of traffic. I do find it a bit rich that the county council saying the road is not really up to any standard, since they're supposedly maintain it. And my understanding has always been that if where development occurs, then it's up to the county council to actually catch up, as it were. I mean, I accept what Councillor Evans is saying, but I think one of the problems that we have when we move urban areas into what technically were residential rural areas, then you will always have this conflict. If you live in an urban area, I don't think there's many houses that don't have somebody else looking into their back garden. A lot of people are fortunate enough to have a large enough garden or be in an area where that's not the case, but it's not actually very often happens in an urban area. And unfortunately, the way the town is growing, we are creating more and more urban areas in what were formerly traditionally rural areas. So, I think we have to accept that will happen. I personally don't see anything wrong with it, with this development. I think it was the development that's already there is well laid out, and like Councillor Better, I've been and had a look. It's well laid out, and I do know that from my experience with the management companies that are left on these sites, that they do actually maintain the sites very, very well. So personally, I have no further objections no objections at all to this. Especially with the, I think the objections which could have been raised, I think the applicant has gone a long way to really resolve, which is not always the case. So I'm quite happy to support it. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Goodale. Does anyone else wish to speak? Councillor Watson, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you for the presentations. While I also sympathise with residents and their views, to me that there are similar letters that have come from half a dozen or so residents speaks to me that maybe it's only one or two. So if people are going to object, I would have thought there would be more individual letters sent. Having said that, I feel Councillor Evans has a point that, and I too would prefer to see on the edge of the development bungalows and then going to two-storey. But at the end of the day, this is what the application is. I can't see that we can refuse this. We don't really have grounds to refuse it. I really have to support this application. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watson. Seeing no one else indicating that they would like to speak, unless anyone has any points that they'd like to pick up, I'm happy that it has been moved by Councillor Austin and seconded by Councillor Noble that the paper is accepted with the application is accepted, is granted permission with the recommendations and delegations as printed. I'm happy to put it to the vote and invite those in favour to raise their hands, please. And those against? Thank you. And any abstentions, just for clarity? Thank you. That is clearly carried. Thank you very much. As I say, members of the public, you are welcome to stay for the rest of today's agenda. You're welcome equally to leave if you wish. It's entirely up to you. You're very welcome to stay if you want to follow our agenda. But we will move on to our next item of business, which is the adoption of the local list report on page 39 of the agenda. And Mr. Gildersleeve will present the report, please.
Just bear with me 1 second, Mr. Chairman, just making sure the technology's still working. So the local list report is before you. It is before you for noting. So just provides background on this initiative, which is being brought forward in conjunction with a number of partners across Greater Lincolnshire. As you'll see from the report, the council, as part of that cooperative in effect, was successful in securing approximately £70,000 from the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities, who were promoting the opportunity to encourage local authorities to develop local lists in order to protect buildings or features of local heritage interest that might not necessarily be worthy of statutory listing. The project is being coordinated and managed by Heritage Lincolnshire, as set out in the report. And for clarity, as I say, the local list is there to cover what are termed non-designated heritage assets in planning terms. This means they're not afforded any statutory protection, so you don't need consent to do works to those assets, but they would be a material consideration in planning decision making, both in terms of policy and the applications we receive. The selection criteria has been developed to provide a cohesive approach across the county and across the group. The selection criteria is based upon Historic England guidance and has already been adopted by the other members of the South and East Lincolnshire Councils Partnership, East Lindsey and South Holland. So in effect, Boston Borough Council will be moving to that arrangement. And as I say, we already have existing delegations in place within, as set out within the report, to enable this to be brought in, to be promoted, the list to be adopted, any subsequent additions to the list to be managed and maintained. So therefore, members, it is purely there for you to note the presence of the report and make any comments. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Gildersleeve. For my own thoughts on this, it is something to be extensively welcomed as a means of giving protection to those assets that don't meet the criteria in order to be listed under the 1-2 star arrangements, but still have a significant value to local communities. And I think that's the key here, is this is as much community-led as ever it would be council-led. And it comes down to communities to have a really important role in putting forward suggestions to be of buildings or heritage assets to be included within this scheme. I think it's absolutely the right balance between listing something which comes with onerous obligations, and I've always felt actually that a trick was missed when the old grade 3 listing was abolished, insofar as I feel that there is genuinely a role for protecting buildings from effectively being demolished, but not to the extent that you require them to be restored with horsehair plaster and the correct flecks of black in the mortar and nonsense like that, which often can make a property which might be viable to effectively restore be the cost of that to be prohibitive, the point to which the building doesn't get restored, it just gets worse and worse and worse. And that cost-benefit ratio of putting in the money to bring it back from the brink gets progressively worse. So I feel this is, as near as I've seen in policy terms, an opportunity to fill in that gap and ensure that building properties that are captured by this, it is a material consideration. So I'm not saying it doesn't feel like there's a guarantee that it will stop something being knocked down, but it would be something that is enters into the mix with a greater degree of weight than it currently does. So anything in that direction, just for my humble mind, feels to be a really good thing to do. And the fact that we're able to do this across Lincolnshire, I don't think it would be possible to do this if it wasn't being done on this scale and with the support that the project has. So that's just my penny's worth. Councillor Austin, please.
Thank you. Well, I waved this document in front of my husband last night, well, earlier than last night actually, but his first reaction was, well, isn't everything listed? You know, we've got so many listed buildings, but of course we're talking about a list which is different from what's normally thought of listed buildings. So my first thoughts were, what might we be including? I can't remember, but please perhaps, oh, Matt's not here, but maybe Matt Bentley isn't with us, but is, for instance, the Glidodrome actually a listed building? Does it have a grade 2 or anything listing or not? Because that obviously is the sort of building that once nearly got demolished and then didn't. But so, you know, I'd be interested to know, you know, just plucking the odd thing out of the air, what might be listed. Secondly, again, Richard said, my husband said, can things be delisted? In other words, is there a delisting process? And then I want to add one more point. You've suggested, for instance, that I think I saw somewhere in here about CVS possibly being a community, anyway, community involvement. And could I suggest that you really do engage with the Boston Heritage Forum, of which Matt Bentley is a member, because that has people interested in things that you don't necessarily think of as being heritage, and like things in the monuments in the old cemetery in Boston. There's a wide range of interests within those people, within that group of people. So I would like to see them actively circulated with information about this. Ironically, I think they're actually meeting this morning. Yes, it seems a good idea, but I want to know, I would like to know, you know, what's going to be put forward. But yes, so I've nothing against it. So let's go ahead.
Thank you. Councillor Noble, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, what an excellent concept, what an excellent idea. Because obviously there's quite a few buildings around Boston that would benefit from being on this list. I think important point to note, of course, though, that there's no legal protection. There's no statutory legal protection for these buildings that do go on the local list. But it's quite a couple of questions really for Mr. Gildersleeves. Can the Assistant Director Planning expedite or suggest that a building be moved or transferred from the local list to listed building status? Because that would be helpful. And also, can he also confirm that someone can apply to have a building listed even if they're not in ownership of it?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So a few questions there. So I'll pick up Councillor Noble's ones in order. This does not prevent somebody putting forward a building to be nationally listed, though that is managed by Historic England, and they will make that determination. Where I see this fitting in is exactly Councillor Ashton's point about the old grade 3. So if I give you a local example that we've had, the Scala Theatre, for example, numerous people wanted it listed. It's been applied for twice. Historic England have turned it down for national listing twice due to the amount of change. It might, and I'm not prejudging what comes on the list, it might be able to be looked at as a local list. Doesn't give it any statutory protection, but what it hopefully does is when somebody buys that building or takes that building on, they do it with an air of understanding that the building has some local importance. And equally, it may open us up to opportunities for further funding, for example. It is possible, therefore, that you could get a building, if it's sufficiently good quality, goes from being on our local list to then being nationally listed. The two processes are not mutually exclusive. There is overlap between them. In terms of whether somebody can get a building listed without them being the owner, yeah, that's exactly the process, same as it would apply nationally. Things can be put on the list, but equally delisted. Again, buildings do change over time, assets change over time. If we take a monument, for example, and it gets damaged by a falling tree, for example, again, we might look at delisting something in future. So there is that mechanism there with that list, and the criteria that we've got there will be in place, and the list will be continually reviewed. So I think that's covered most of them. And the final point I did want to pick up on was the Gliderdrome. That is in part nationally listed. We were notified of that just before Christmas, predominantly due to the sprung dance floor and the quality of the main internal ballroom space. But yeah, Historic England did notify us of that. It's quite an interesting listing decision if you read it, because it kind of goes through and almost leads you to the conclusion they're not going to list it, and then they do list it at the end. So what, as I say, where this is supposed to pick up is those buildings like the Scala that aren't sufficient quality for national listing, but are of local importance to us. And it does give us the opportunity to pick up different features as well that Historic England wouldn't normally list. Hopefully that picks up both points.
Thank you. Chairman, just come back and ask one further question. If one applies for listing of a building, is there a cost involved? Is it significant?
No, in terms of if somebody wants to apply, it's a free application process. Anybody can lodge it. And the owner is engaged with by Historic England, and they have the opportunity to object, as the Gliderdrome did. Obviously, the extent to which you object or support that listing, there may be a cost involved to you as the owner if you want to defend your position of not having it listed. But no, there is no physical cost to applying for something to be listed.
Thank you.
And if I may, Chairman, the final point of Councillor Austin's was about community engagement. Heritage Links, who are leading this project, are well experienced in this area. They work with the CBS, they work with the Town Forum, they work with numerous other heritage groups across the county. So I believe they will make sure that it gets sufficiently publicised.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak on this? Councillor Bedford.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I hope Councillor Austin isn't considering delisting or supporting delisting the Gliderdrome. Some of us spent a very happy youth down there many, many years ago, and it is one of the iconic 1960s dance halls that is complete. I don't think there's many more left in the country, so I was very pleased when it was listed.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bedford. I don't have anyone else indicating to speak. I think we've given that a good noting. I just look at, we are to support the implementation of the local list on the project. Note that the council intend to adopt the criteria at Appendix A, and note the existence of existing delegation to enable the council. So actually, looking at item 1, I would move that the planning committee supports it, and look for a second. Councillor Noble, and just a show of hands on that point, please. Thank you. That's clearly carried. And moving on to item 3, our final report today is the infrastructure funding statement on page 53. And again, Mr. Gildersleeve will present. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Another brief update report. So just to confirm for members that the council successfully submitted its infrastructure funding statement for 2021 to central government in accordance with the legislation. That was submitted in December. It is published there and is available for the public to view, as well as central government. It's our second statement. Again, in terms of the key points to note, 12 new agreements linked to permissions that have been issued within that year that would secure circa £1 million of education and affordable housing contributions, as well as a further 168 affordable housing units. And then to pick up the other side of this, the report also picks up on the delivery or receipts that we've had through that period. So to summarise, 112 affordable housing units, £33,856 of health contributions, 134,559 of education contributions, and CCTV provision for the public open space on Broadfield Lane. Those receipts coming from developments that were approved prior to the IFS 2020-2021. It is there for information purposes and for noting, and happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Councillor Bedford and Councillor Noble, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Fully supported. Can I ask a question on 8.2? When's it opening, please?
I actually had a question with the developer because I believe Councillor Noble raised this last time. It's intended to be within coming months, the next couple of months. They've just gone through the maintenance period with LCC at the moment. There are a few snagging issues that need to be picked up, but my latest understanding is, I would say, end of financial year or slightly beyond.
Thank you, Councillor Noble.
Thank you. Yes, my question refers to page 67, Appendix A. We've got there a list of legal agreements under which are UUs, unilateral undertakings, but can we be clear? Do they have any defined legal status or power, or is it effectively just a vague promise? Can a developer be bound by a unilateral undertaking once it's agreed or signed?
Yes, it's a simple answer. They carry exactly the same weight as a Section 106 agreement. It's all done under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act. They're all logged on the local land charges register. They're enforceable in the same way.
Thank you, Councillor Austin, please.
Thank you. Yes, I think we do pretty well, don't we, for developer contributions, seeing as we don't do SIL as such. Can I ask a question about page 61, 5.2, B17/0515? I'm aware that I am a county councillor and that this is a county council application. But what in the world are they playing at? Why are we still waiting for this to start? It was approved. It was approved ages ago and nothing's happening.
Simple answer is it's up for sale at the moment on the market. If you go on Rightmove, you can find the site. So I believe the county council are looking to sell it. So I would suggest having a conversation with your county colleagues, in particular Councillor Kevin Kendall, I believe, is the property manager for that site. So no, he's not, sorry, yeah, an officer. Yeah, Kevin Kendall would be the relevant contact for that, but it is on the market at the moment. The list you've got there is those agreements that were signed in that year, so signed in the 2021 year. So yes, the application's been around for a while, but we have approved it. It is there. It just needs the land to be sold or a developer to come forward.
There was no requirement that it, I mean, I've looked it up and I can't remember the conditions, but usually you have to start things within a certain period of time.
It's an outline application, so it was only granted last year as well.
It wasn't outline, was it? I thought this was a full application.
No, it was an outline application. It's an outline application.
Was it? Sorry, I obviously got it wrong.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? Appreciating I can't necessarily see hands so well down there. Please wave, scream, shout if I can't see you. I don't see anyone else wishing to raise any points on that, which again is only for noting, and I think we can say that we've done that. So thank you very much on that, Mr. Gillsleeves and committee. I'll thank the committee insofar as that concludes the business this afternoon, this morning. The next meeting is scheduled to take place on Tuesday, the 8th of March, again to be held here in the Guildhall. But I thank you once again for your contributions this morning. We've had some good debates, useful debates across a wide range of issues. I understand we do have some, ladies and gentlemen, from the planning team who have been sitting through. I hope it's been a interesting spectator sport for you. And you're very welcome to hang around and chat to any of us if you'd like to do that, and likewise. But I'll formally close the meeting. If we could stop the recording, please, I'd be much obliged, and wish you a very good rest.